shadowy plot to remove Rishi Sunak has taken a bit of a bitter turn, with rebels creating a so-called grid of shit to target the Prime Minister, employing a group of former government aides to whip up a storm of announcements to put a dent in Rishi's plans. I'm joined now by former Conservative advisor Leon Emirali and a political editor of The Express Online, David Maddox. Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us. And I'll start with you, David. I mean, Rishi Sunak's doing a pretty good job of kiboshing his own career anyway, isn't he? Why would they bother?
Yeah, I mean, when I saw the grid of the sticky brown stuff, I have to be honest. I thought, why have they gone to all the effort? I mean, it seems to be literally week in, week out. There seems to be one disaster after another,
Right.
or I mean, whether it's PMQs and upsetting people in the gallery, or some dodgy social media. It seems bizarre to me, but I mean, it kind of plays into the fact that there are plots, I should say. It's not just one plot. I mean, there's of course the Dougie Smith, Michael Gove allegedly, although of course he's a loyal member of a cabinet. That sort of plot to get Kemi in, but there are other plots going on as well, with various leadership hopefuls, whether that's Suella Braverman or even Robert Jenrick, perhaps, or Liz Truss wanting to make a comeback, God help us. It never stops. And at some point, somebody's going to pull the trigger, I think.
Well, I guess so, but it's a question of who's holding the gun, really, isn't it? Because Kemi Badenoch keeps getting mentioned as well, particularly by Nadine Dorries and Leon. I don't know what a grid of shit actually is. I mean, have you ever come across this particular phraseology in your time behind the door of Number 10?
It's a new one to me, Mike.
Right.
It's a new one to me. But, I mean, presumably, as David says, Rishi's doing the job for them.
Yeah.
Right? So, I think this is part of the big problem that Rishi Sunak's got, is that there are factions on every single wing of the party who are sort of converging to try and take him out. And I think that's purely for self-preservation, because they can see that Rishi Sunak is going to lead them to an electoral defeat.
But the trouble is, none of them can agree on what the actual way of doing it is. They're all trying to get rid of Rishi Sunak, but none of them are actually singing from the same hymn sheet.
Yeah, and this is always the problem when there is some sort of coup against the leader. Who is the person who's going to take over? And if you haven't got a clear and obvious choice, it's very difficult. I'll take you back to when Theresa May was deposed, and it was obvious Boris Johnson was going to be the guy who comes in. It isn't obvious now who is going to be that man or woman who takes over from Rishi Sunak. Kemi's name's being mentioned. She's not universally popular in the party by any stretch. So I think until there is a single candidate they can unify around, Rishi may well find himself just being covered in shit, but not necessarily being taken down by it.
Quite right, too. Well, this is the thing, David. I mean, we already had Simon Clarke sort of stepping out in front of everybody else just last week, the week before, and suggesting that Rishi Sunak had to step aside because he was ruining the party. But he did that literally about a day after I'd seen Liz Truss, who was very happy to tell me that he was one of their sort of 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. He was going to launch PopCon, and he was immediately then shunted out of that group because they didn't actually want to back getting rid of Rishi yet.
Yes, I mean, it's all very confused, frankly. I mean, I have to say the mood this last week, and you have to take it week by week with the Tory MPs at the moment, but the mood this last week is that there doesn't seem to be a kind of desire to jump straight into a leadership contest. A lot of them just seem depressed and exhausted, perhaps because they're going on holiday next week. We've got a recess next week.
Yes,
so
for half
maybe
term.
they'll come back a little bit more energised. I think the issue is going to be the by-elections myself. If they end up coming third in 2 by-elections, which were safe seats, then surely that's going to be the point where they say this guy's got to go. If not, frankly, it'll be too late, and they've got to go into the election with him.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the other opportunity, Leon, would be the local elections, I think, in May, which I've been told previously, if they go really horribly wrong for the Tories, he'll have to go.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way that he can continue if he gets trounced in by-elections, trounced in local elections. Well, the general election's next, guess what's going to happen? So, yeah, I think that is going to be a really important point when the aftermath of the May elections. But it might be too late by then, Mike, because you let's say that you get a new leader in place immediately after May. They're probably not going to take the keys until about June. And then how long have you got for them to set out their stall to the country, whoever it is, for an election in October, November time? So I think the timing is going to be very difficult for the Tories to actually get rid of Sunak. I think David's right. I think the by-elections might be the moment that gives them just enough time to make it happen. I think May might be a bit too late.
Yeah. Should we look at what Sir Keir Starmer's been up to, David, as well? Because I read a tweet today from one of your colleagues, I think it was Harry Cole, who said, you know, there is a school of thought that says, you know, when your opponent is making such a hash of everything, you don't really need to say anything. Starmer decided to kibosh his own £28 billion green eco save the planet plan, when I don't think he really needed to, did he?
No, I mean, it's just amazing, really. It seems like all the main parties have been going through some form of personal grief in the last 24 hours. I mean, Ed Miliband, we worked out, has been missing in action for more than 100 days as well. It's his environment chap. I mean, it's not good. And this, of course, is the one last great hope, the straw to clutch on for the Conservatives, is that Keir Starmer literally now doesn't stand for anything. He's just ditched his one major policy. He also ditched a minor policy, which was to abolish the House of Lords, mainly because, quotes, they're doing a good job, i.e. stopping things like the Rwanda bill or stopping, you know, some of the Conservative reforms. So why get rid of your allies, I guess. But, you know, this is a problem with British politics at the moment. It's not a great choice. And frankly, with very little to offer and not a great deal of charisma, it is possible, if Rishi survives a coup or non-coup, that he could actually pull it back against Starmer. And that's their one hope.
Well, I mean, the one hope, I suppose, as well, is that they don't necessarily lose by quite such a big margin as they thought, which you and I have said before is probably more than likely to be the case. But one thing that Ed Miliband seems to have got rid of, I'm not sure if anybody could find it, it was retweeted a few times this morning, was his tweet from the 9th of June 2023. Some people don't want Britain to borrow to invest in the green economy. They want us to back down. But Keir, Rachel and I will never let that happen. Britain needs this £28 billion a year plan, and that is what we are committed to. Well, you can just rip that one up, Ed. Have another bacon sandwich, mate.
Well, that's Keir Starmer not only lying to the public, but lying to his own shadow cabinet. It's unbelievable. But...
And, of course, some people said today, well, shouldn't Ed Miliband now resign? Because he said that, you know, he would never let this happen.
There's good grounds for him to resign. I mean, that's his whole sort of reason for being, Ed Miliband, is the green agenda. So I think that Labour are really in the muddle because exactly as David says, what are we voting for if we vote for Labour, other than just not the Tories? And that's not going to be good enough. I think the polls will inevitably narrow. And I think that it's going to be a slightly difficult election for Keir Starmer, more difficult than it seems right now. And if there's a very small majority for Labour, let's say 10 seats, 15 seats. I think there's going to be another election quickly, hot on the hills after that, because there'll be a lot of discontent in the Labour Party, just as there is in the Conservative Party right now as well.
Yeah, I think so. And David, I mean, that's the other problem for Labour. I think they've put themselves into a bit of a bind because one of the reasons they said for giving up on this £28 billion plan was that they would be very happy to U-turn any time they thought they couldn't afford to do something. Can you imagine how much that's going to get played back to them? Every time they make any suggestion of spending money, they'll get told, well, you just have to U-turn now because you did it last time when you couldn't find the money.
Yeah, and quite frankly, they've U-turned so often on so many things now. We lost count. My colleague, Christian Calgie, actually was putting together an article on Labour's U-turns in the last few years, and he got to 15. I told him to stop there because, you know, it was just getting exhausting.
I think technically they've disappeared up their own sphincter, haven't they, at this point?
Exactly. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, the issue is, well, it's a very serious one, that Labour literally stands for very little now, apart from the fact that they're not the Tories. Now, there is one precedent they'll be holding on to, which is one which I doubt many of your viewers will have really clocked. It's the 2007, I think it was, Australian election, where Kevin Rudd became the Labour Prime Minister.
Yes.
And they are literally advising him on this. There are people around him advising him on this, saying, and the strategy was to say nothing and let the Liberal Party, which of course is their version of the Tories, implode. And that duly happened. Kevin Rudd won and became Prime Minister. And then everybody was shocked when he actually started doing some left-wing things. And that seems to be the only thing now that the Labour Party have got left in the locker.
Yeah. It's an amazing situation that they can have such useless choices. I think this is the worst election prospect I think I've ever seen.
And I think that's why we're seeing Reform doing so well in the polls. And, you know, that wasn't the case before. And you've effectively got the right of the vote being split now by obviously Reform and the Conservatives. And I don't blame the public for looking for alternatives because they can't get what they want from the current Conservative government. They can't get what they want from the Labour government. So where else do they look? And I think there's just a great amount of apathy right now in British politics. The public aren't interested, the public aren't engaged because as far as they're concerned, it's all the same. Nothing is going to change. Their lives aren't going to be any better, regardless of who's in Downing Street. And what a horrible situation to be in. We should have politicians with a vision for the country that differ, have two sets of proposals, and we decide what's the right course of action. Currently, Keir Starmer's saying nothing. Rishi Sunak's not entirely sure exactly what he's doing or what he's saying. And what are we, the voting public, meant to do with that? I
mean, today he even sort of mentioned the B word, didn't he? Boris Johnson said, oh, I still speak to Boris and, you know, I feel that we did some very many great things together. Nadine Dorries immediately came out and said, that's not true. He doesn't talk to Boris at all. I mean, can Boris ever come back?
Well, I think Boris is clearly incredibly popular still with the country as well as the Conservative Party. I think that it was a mistake, in retrospect, to get rid of him entirely because Partygate was, yes, a blot on his copybook, but it wasn't necessarily the end of the world.
But was it really Partygate? I mean, it was more all the other stuff, wasn't it?
Well, I think it was. I think it was effectively people wanted their crack at the whip and that's what they wanted. But if Boris comes out and says, I fully support Rishi Sunak and this government, that will be a boost for him, to Rishi Sunak. I mean, I don't know. It depends what Rishi Sunak can offer him, right, in return. If he can offer him something that's appealing, then maybe there might be some sort of deal to have between the two. But let's remember, it was Rishi Sunak ultimately who came to his... Exactly. He was the one who got rid of Boris. So I think what he does next will be a big step in some sort of direction for Sunak.
David, you see that scenario playing out?
No, I don't at all. I mean, I know that the Conservative membership want to bring back Boris desperately, and of course they're right in wanting that. Of course he can't because he's no longer an MP. We ran a survey that Conservative Post had done with 2,000 Conservative members, which showed by far and away that Boris was the #1 choice. And of course it was a historic mistake to get rid of him. I mean, there's only two people with the charisma to save the Conservative Party, and that's Boris and Nigel Farage. And let's be honest, whilst the members may want both of them or either of them, most of the MPs don't want them, and that's the problem with the party at the moment. I mean, it's a complete mess. I don't see Boris endorsing Rishi at all because he's still very hurt about what happened. I could see him coming back. I could see him endorsing the next leader and being the kingmaker or queenmaker for the next leader, and then coming back on the back of that and maybe leading the party again at some point.
I mean, whenever you see him in a room, they're all still rushing to be next to him and have their pictures taken with him. And I'm talking about MPs, not just members of the public. You know, there's still a big draw there. Maybe they could just give him a peerage, stick him in the House of Lords like David Cameron.
That would be the logic, wouldn't it? Is that you bring him back into the fold in some way or another. But I think there is a lot of animosity between the two camps, even if not between Rishi and Boris personally. I think there is anyway. But between the two camps, there really is a level of animosity. So to get them working together again, I'm not sure is necessarily going to be an easy thing to do. But Boris Johnson is the one superstar of the Conservative Party. He really is. And you see it at party conference, as you say, you see it when he walks into a room. Everyone with a Conservative leaning seems to adore him. And he invokes this sense of either love or hate. And sometimes that's enough to win elections if you've got enough, more people that love or hate. Sunak's problem is people don't feel anything about him at all. And that's a real problem because he can't whip up some sort of base to take him over the line in an election. Boris could do that. Nigel Farage could do that. There's not many others in the Conservative Party or in the Conservative movement who could.
No, I think that's right. Neil Amirani, thank you very much indeed. David Maddox, thank you to you as well. We'll have more on the Rishi Sunak phenomenon, as it might be called or might not be called later on